Hello again, and welcome to Module 2 of this Value Transformation Project Management, Learning Organization Development, and Motivation. Today we're going to take a look at the initiating phase of a project. The course is broken down into 7 modules, consists of a glossary of terms, some quizzes, some tests, some areas for you to put your thoughts on a certain topic area, discussion board area, and things like that. The course syllabus is also available online for you to review at your discretion and leisure. So today we're going to talk about these things. This is the agenda. Project Lifecycle. We'll talk about a little bit about Stagegate projects, how that works. We're going to take a look at, in a little bit of detail, the process area initiation. Although the site has a lot more information on this particular attribute of a project that you can read and research and watch more videos and things like that. We're going to talk about systems thinking, motivation, learning opportunities, and the initiating process. When we talk about project lifecycle, we're talking about the things that you do from the very start of the project to the very end of the project, where whatever you're working on is delivered. And that a lot of times that has an industry slant to it. The one in the bottom right hand corner you see is a Department of Defense kind of thing, where you in one part of the project you do concept and technology development. In another part of the project, after you've gone through the concept and technology development, you'll do system development and some kind of demonstration, and you'll convert that. After you've successfully achieved those things, you'll do the production and deployment, and after you've successfully done those things, you'll figure a way of sustaining the product over time, and ultimately a disposal method. The other one in the upper left-hand corner is a little bit more generic. Let's take a look at the bottom one, plan. You plan what you're going to do, you analyze, you're going to design what it is that you're designing. You're going to build some of those, run some tests on it. Eventually, assuming you pass the tests or the failures you find in the tests are something you can live with, you'll deploy it and you'll maintain it. These are examples of project life cycles. When we talk about Stagegate, we call each one of these, you can refer to them as a phase. And a Stagegate has a chunk in between each one of these phases where you are looking to see what you have done and looking back over that, and then looking forward to see if what you've done means that you can continue to move forward and be successful in this project. In this specific example, we develop a concept. The concept should have had some objectives to achieve at the very beginning. And at this red bar, we're going to have a gate review. We're going to say things like, or ask questions like, did we achieve our list of objectives in the concept phase? Can we produce this, in theory, at the cost we think we need to have it? Can we price it at the sale price we need to have it? And if those questions are answered successfully or affirmatively, then the project is allowed to proceed to the actual develop phase of the Stagegate. And likewise, at the end of the development phase, you should have had some objectives. You'll ask similar questions, probably a little bit different because the objectives are different. And then you will move to, assuming you make it past that, you'll move to the final development, and so on and so forth. So this is what Stagegate looks like. Each one of these red bars looks forward and looks backward to see if the project's still relevant and you have actually achieved what you thought you were going to achieve. These are called kill points, because if you don't hit those targets, what do you think may happen at that red bar?
That would be the termination of the project at that point.
Right. The concept says we can't sell it, we can't produce it, then we're done with this project, close it out, do something with what we learned in this leg. We'll talk about that in probably future slides and future modules, certainly. Do something you've learned about it, and then close this project down. when we talk about projects, if you look at the PMI, that's the Project Management Institute discussion of project management, they break it down into 5 process groups, which are the same 5 process groups that we break this training down. The first thing is the initiating, and that's what this discussion is going to be about, these slideshows. Next is planning, implementation or execution, regulation or monitor and control, and then you terminate or close the project. So at the beginning of the project, you're looking at the beginning of concept, so you're right here at concept when you're looking at initiating or inception. Okay? And then you're going to work through every one of these inside the concept phase. You're going to do something, initiate. You're going to plan how you're going to do something in the concept phase. You're going to execute some things in the concept phase. You're going to monitor and control some things in the concept phase. And eventually you're going to come to a place where you're going to close the concept phase out. And that's where the gate reviews are at. Make sense?
But isn't it true, John, that most of these, even though like with the gate process, they do overlap in such a nature that you are actually in the next phase before the previous phase is done?
Yes. In fact, some of the objectives of your concept phase should be things that allow the next phase to proceed, right? For example, if your concept phase, let's go back to the previous slide. If the concept phase is to deliver a specific system definition that can be developed, if for some reason or other, at the end of the concept phase, we have not defined the system adequately to be able to develop it, then the concept phase will not allow you to go into the development phase. In other words, the attributes of the delivery of concept phase are the things that should be fed into develop phase. That would be one reason for not allowing the gate to pass. Yeah, we can make money on it. We can make money on it, and we can sell it, but we have no idea how to do it, so we can't therefore move to develop it.
But there is some overlap in a forward nature, not in a backwards nature.
Yeah.
Some of the concept process or plan leads into development. However, not the development goes backwards into concept.
That's right.
So it would be an example of, like we talked about on previous training module, of loop learning, but this is single directional loop learning.
Okay.
So what I'm saying is development can lead back to concept, but unless concept is fully satisfied, development cannot occur.
Right. Now, you can choose to take some risks if you believe what is being delivered in concept phase is sufficient, that you can move forward with development and maybe burden the development with some things that should have been handled in concept phase. But that's a judgment call usually.
Yes, and you'd have to worry about the unintended consequence and shifting of burden archetypes.
That's right.
Which could be detrimental to the succeeding portions of your project.
That's right. That's right. It's essentially a risk. What you're saying is, I will accept this risk because the reward is high enough. But to do that, you obviously need to know what's at risk and what's the reward.
Exactly. And I think we'll touch on that a little bit later in this training topic.
Yep. So the initiating process contains things like this. Business case. The initiating process kicks off the project or starts the project. We'll need to know who are the sponsors. Those are the people that are funding this thing. We'll need to know some strategy that the company may have for this project. And certainly we have to develop a strategy for how the project is to achieve the end goals of the project or the objectives. We certainly have to understand what the scope of the project is. That is, what is it? What are those objectives? What specifically should we, at the end of this project, say, yea, verily, we have accomplished our objectives, and we should go off and have a big barbecue dinner or something. That's what you find in the scope. We also need to know what kind of things we need to know to be able to plan this project. And that means what kind of talents are required to plan this project. And essentially what kind of resources are also needed. For example, in our beginning phase, our concept phase, we'll have the business case, we'll kick off the project, we'll understand who the sponsors are, what is the end goal, not just of the concept, but of the entire project, and what are the specific pieces that we have to deliver in the concept phase, what kind of strategies we're going to take for that concept phase, a clear definition of the specific deliverables or scope of the concept phase, and who all needs to be involved in this from the concept phase. For me, the big ones are these four: sponsor, strategy, scope, and talents required. Those are big opportunities for learning.
I would agree with you, and I think a lot of what we're trying to present in this module is it's not uncommon for this one right here to be the main driver.
Yep.
So with that, what I'm trying to say is, in most models, corporations or organizations look at a business case and they look at, can we make money? Well, that is important to an organization to make money so they can sustain their organization or their company. They also have to balance what can we gain from this as a whole. And knowing the rest of these things, like you touched on the four that you feel are key as a project manager, okay, they need to understand that even if you break even on a project, there can still be a gain to the organization. What can we learn? And an example of that would be, you previously had a project which is similar to this new one you're doing your business case on, and you made some modifications to your organization, but you haven't been able to prove it out. In your business case, this is a low-end project. It's not very large, but if you were to look at, can I test those changes I made out to prove that they work, but I'm going to break even on the money, but in the long term, if I prove out those changes, or I prove that they didn't and I need to modify them again, the overall organization as a whole may be better off for breaking even.
Right. Yes. It may put you in a gathering that intel and generating that knowledge within your organization better puts you in a better place to compete strategically, perhaps.
And one of the other things I would like to point out is this one right here. Okay, so the talents that are required, you might not always have the talent that is required to execute a project.
Well, this is just a planning phase, but you're still right.
Understood. But you could look at that. If your organization doesn't have the talent, or all of the talent, they just, let's say you only have 70% of the talent you feel is required for this. Well, this is an opportunity for development.
Yep.
So when most people think of a business case, it's the money into the aspect. Whereas business cases do look at the other parts of it, that's not a prevalent item. And I think that in most times, companies lose some of their edge by focusing 70% on just the monetary. They need to, and I'm not saying it needs to be 50-50 or you might not ever make any money. What I'm saying is it should be weighted almost as much for your lessons learned for your organization, your testing of your changes, your development of your personnel for that business case as well.
Yeah, how does it enable me strategically to better compete?
Exactly.
That's a function typically of a Western style business where we don't think maybe so far in advance. Now, this slide is in here just to let you know that there's considerable other things on the site explaining the project initiation process in further detail. This is not a project initiation class, but you do need to know a little bit about what happens in this phase to understand what opportunities you may have for learning and organization development. So the rest of, there's plenty of material over there to kind of give you a better idea of what's happening in the initiating phase. And here's where we make the transition to what this is really talking about, which is the learning possibilities.
We touched on this a little bit already. So when you're talking about the gates, okay, and we talked about this quite at length in our first discussion about knowing what your internal and external stakeholders are, your organization, and I actually put a little curve onto it. I always say customer supplier, okay, internal, external. You can have internal customers, internal suppliers, right? So your manufacturing group provides to your testing group. Your testing group provides to your placement group, or however it's laid out. That is internal customers or stakeholders in it, okay? And anytime it's internal for a stakeholder or a customer, there should be portions of that. Let's say your manufacturing group feeds to your testing group. Your testing group should be embedded in your manufacturing group, okay? You wouldn't be at a store trying to sell something to your customer if your customer did not even know what it was. So your customer comes in and he wants an Allen wrench, so you hand him a crescent wrench. You go, well, this is what we made for you. Well, that's not what I need.
Yeah.
So we talk about the loop style of internal customers or stakeholders, however you want to say it, and other business units. It's not uncommon that with today's business model, several portions that were previously internal to an organization are done by subcontracting. I don't want to maintain a factory, but yet I want you to make me my widgets.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll give you the specs for the widget. Okay. In doing that, it really turns into customer-supplier relation, and you need to make sure that the group that's getting the delivery of those items from your external source are embedded in the making of that.
Yeah, I would go one further. That's certainly true, but even if they're all under one roof, for example, let's say the people that write the requirements have to write the requirements good enough for the people designing the product to be able to do it. So the customer of the requirements document are the people who actually happen to build to those requirements, write software or design some hardware. The same could be true for the people who get after the design is done, the people who actually run the tests on those parts, because they're the next person to receive the product. So there is even a customer / supplier organization into motif or dynamic going on, even if everybody's under one roof, but they're in different departments.
I would agree. So I would say at a minimum, well, I was trying to spell customer, but it didn't come out right.
I read it. I could read it.
Let's try it this way. So I think there should always be a looping or grouping of three.
Yep.
To make a process smooth. The customer should be talking to the supplier, which should be talking to the next customer.
Yep.
And the reason I put it customer, supplier, customer instead of supplier, customer, supplier is because you have to look at it backwards. The test, if in our example, you had the manufacturer, you had the testing group, and then you had the actual assembly group, right?
Okay.
So
The
the testing group,
I think it was the design group.
or you could say design group.
Yep.
Yep. So the manufacturing group provides to the testing group, which is the customer. So those two have to be talking up front. But before they can even talk to each other, you need the design group to talk to both of them.
Yep.
Okay, so at a minimum, you should have 3 tiers of your process chain communicating with each other at all times to make sure what you're producing is in accordance with your objective. And the only way to really make sure this occurs is in your initiation phase.
Yep.
Because you can have those overlaps and show the key points. What is a milestone for group 1 should also be a key point for group 2 and 3.
Yep. Keep in mind the initiating phase has to bring out the scope. And you can't bring out the entire scope unless you understand what everybody needs to make this happen.
Exactly.
Yep.
So when you're making your key events and milestones on your plan of action or your project plan, you should be tiering your key events so that you have 3 groups aligned to that event. The one who's going to make it, the one who's going to test it, and the one who's going to produce the design words so that both parties know where they're going with it.
Yep. Or at any time there's a handoff between one part of the company and another part. That's another.
Yes, and it should always be 3. Yep. So I think that that's a very important process to bring out, and the initiation phase is where you should be looking for that overlap.
Yep.
And not so much in the very beginning of the initiation phase, but in the middle of it to the end, when you're using the initiation phase to yield your plan and your mission statement for the project. A lot of people think a mission statement is just for the military or stuff like that. I disagree. A mission statement shows clear and concise objectives for an organization or a project so that everybody can understand where you're trying to go. It may be broad in nature at the upper levels, but as it comes down to each individual group within the project or organization, it gets more veneered to what they need to know.
Yep.
What the objective is. And that helps with systems thinking, because then you can look at the entire mission statement from the upper chain down to the last person that's turning the wrench, and everyone knows how their role is in that process and what would yield if they didn't do it properly.
Yep, and I think that's a great segue, because what's next? Whoa, yeah.
Oh, systems thinking.
We didn't know that was going to be there, did we?
It's almost like we wrote this lesson.
Almost like we did, yeah.
Yep. So we obviously have touched on systems thinking a little bit here. And a lot of people, when they think systems thinking, they go, an electrical schematic. I can tell you where the power starts and how it goes through transistors and diodes, and I did that just for you since you're an electrical engineer, John. Wouldn't want to confuse you with piping schematics. Okay? But systems thinking, if you've delved into any of like Carnegie's Fifth Disciplines or any of the other books about the topic, is not just the physical aspect, it's also the aspect of the entire organization. Where do you or your group fit in, and how can a change in your process affect something downstream? And I believe in our last training topic, we made it an analogy of, I put a rock in the head of a stream at the top of the mountain. I put it right in the center.
Yep.
By the time it comes down the mountain, now I have 4 different rivers and I've changed the path entirely.
Yep.
You have to be able to understand that how that's going to affect things. Okay, and the only real way to do that is to know how the system works. All right, or you're going to wind up with one of your archetypes, unintended consequences, shifting the burden.
That's the big one, unintended consequences, and our government seems to have a lot of that too. They don't think ahead far enough, and they make some crazy whatever, and not to get into politics too much because it doesn't really matter who's in power. It's there are unintended consequences, and systems thinking is supposed to help you keep from getting into those unintended consequences.
Exactly. Well, there's always the case of best laid plans of mice and men do go astray.
Yeah. No matter how good our systems thinking is.
Yes, but the better your systems thinking is, the less churn or turmoil it'll cause for your people.
Yeah.
And the less churn or turmoil you cause them, the less stress they're under about that, and the more productive they can be in focusing on other items.
The lower the risk, the more likely you are to hit your objective too.
Exactly. So we touched a little bit on loop learning, or double loop system analysis, when you were doing the gates, how one loops to the other, even though you can't move into the next one without meeting the requirements of the first one. You can look into the next one knowing how it will proceed into the next one and feed back to the first one.
Yeah, that's what you're supposed to do, actually. You're supposed to learn something from that to tell you whether the next one could be successful or not.
Now, in the initiation phase, like I brought up earlier, when you're looking for something other than the cost benefit as far as making money in the corporation, the loop learning could be, we changed something in our previous project. We changed the floor setup for producing a tool or a control box. Now, I can use my new project to validate or invalidate the change that I have made. That is also an example of loop learning across projects. A lot of times we take our lessons learned and we put them in our box, and then we seal the box up when the project's done, and only if it was extremely painful do we remember it. But that's painful to who? The people that are analyzing for cost-benefit analysis don't normally see what your testing engineer, what your design engineer, what your manufacturing person saw as stress.
Yeah, and a lot of times it happens so far after the event of any consequence that people either remember it exaggeratedly too horrible or don't remember the fact that it was good or bad in general. So it's not it doesn't help to write it in a book. It just kind of gets lost.
Yep, so these two things play perfectly into your initiation phase. You can plan for both. Using your system thinking to help lay out how it works, and using your loop learning to help validate or test your initiation. Oh, look, system syncing again.
Yeah, we're going a little more detail here.
Exactly. And we've touched on this. We talked about system archetypes and simulations. There are numerous programs online nowadays that you can punch in what your project is going to be, and it'll give you a probability of success and different possible outcomes based upon your personnel and their talent pools and stuff like that. And we touched a little bit on the archetype of shifting of burden. You may think that you put what needs to happen in a specific area, but when you actually put it into play, you find out that now your testing group doesn't have enough time, or your manufacturing group is constrained by your outline of what you wanted. Okay, so that's shifting of burden and unintended consequences. You thought that by putting an extra machine on the floor for the manufacturing area would cause you to be able to produce more, but yet you overloaded the circuit, and now your entire factory is shut down.
Yeah.
Or you've overloaded your personnel. So there are a lot of things that come into play with looking at those, and you can use what you've previously done in that phase, in your initiation and planning phase, to validate or unvalidate, okay? We also talk about principles, structures, and influences behavior, policy resistance, and leverage, okay? They almost seem like all the same thing, right? So policy resistance, you change something. Everybody, what's natural response to a change?
Oh, it worked better the other way. Why are we doing this stupid thing?
I'm used to it being this way. Why did you change it?
Yeah.
Well, one of the things we talked about too is the communication of a mission statement or plan. Okay? And this is a great example of loop learning. If you know that this is going to occur, policy change resistance, you have to leverage certain things to get people to do what you want them to, all right? And you got to structure the organization and the way you do things to get the behavior you want. Why wouldn't you embed that in your initiation and planning phase so that you're communicating it from the very get-go what you're after?
Yeah.
And get the feedback. And the other part that's just as important is you get the feedback from the people that will be doing it. We're thinking about changing this for this project and using the project as a validation. What do you think, since you're the one that's going to make it and you're the one who's going to test it? What words do you need? So again, you have the three people, customer, supplier, customer. You get them in a room.
Yeah.
Okay, it's not just an accountant and a senior manager working on your business model.
Yeah, or just a collection of managers that might represent those departments. That's another one that's not quite so good.
Well, yes, when you get a large collection of groupings like that, you wind up with more infrastructure quarreling than you do assistance. That's why I say it's a three group, right? If you keep your group at three, then when the first customer quits being a customer, then you go to the next group of three and three and three and three, right? Keep it overlapping in that manner. Even if in your initiation phase, you keep the group small enough so that communication is more effective.
Yeah.
And we talked about all the inhibitors for communication. Okay, even on the basic of communication, you have at least 4 inhibitors to what's going on. Okay, my brain, to my mouth, to your ear, to your brain are all opportunities for what I'm telling you to get distorted.
Yeah, and if you look at that PMI calculation for communications channels, you can see that as the number of people grow, the communications channels or opportunities grow rapidly, and being able to manage that gets to be really bad. It's the equation. If you look at the equation, look it up online if you're interested. You'll see that even a small group of 10 has a really ridiculous number of possible communications channels.
So that's kind of ironic. We all know this.
Yeah.
Anybody who's initiated or planned a project knows that. But yet, every time we go to initiate and plan a project, what happens?
We do the same old stuff.
Yeah. You get 15 people into the room.
Yeah.
If you were planning the first project, I could understand. You're planning the second project, the very first thing you should be looking at is, hey, getting 15 people into the room caused this problem. If it causes this problem, let's group it down to 6, 5, 3, or whatever, and you can keep working on it. That's an example of loop learning and lessons learned. Yeah. You know this is a problem, so correcting it. Great segue, John. So, Lewin knew exactly what he was talking about when he talked about loop learning. There isn't a single process that we go through in our life that can't be thought of as a loop learning experience. Okay? So, just looking at it here, Even the simplest, right? A single loop learning. You did something, it was right, you're good, you carry on again, you do it again. Loop learning, all right, I burned my hand on the stove. I'm not going to put my hand on the stove. However, I could put my hand on the stove if I turned the temperature down to where it wasn't uncomfortable. So you keep testing it and shifting it so you learn from it and figure out what the limits are. So loop learning is not just for correcting issues, it's also for developing the edge of something. A lot of people try and focus it down to, I had a problem, I'm going to feed it back, and it's a lesson learned item. No, loop learning is also, how far can I push it for it to be better?
Or broken.
Because if you're, or broken.
Yeah.
If you test it to the point where it breaks and you back off one, all right, my car will do 100 miles an hour. 101, the motor pops. Now I know, never go to 101.
Yeah.
But that's a great example of continually developing, and is another segue into one of the other topics that we got on later about personal mastery. And I believe you recently posted a blog post about that, John.
Yeah, the one we were working on this morning, last night, went up today. I think I'll put the link. I'll put the link into the course material after we're done.
Yeah, I think that'd be a good thing, because a lot of people look at personal mastery as, by its definition, personal, okay, for development of just the individual or the environment of the individual, okay. If you look at, as I believe it was coined, project or group mastery and corporate mastery, where we take it a step higher and go into that, which is a great example of double and single loop learning, where you continually feed back what's going on to your groups, your organization, to allow it to develop that mastery.
Right.
Okay, what I would recommend everybody does is Google Lewin and read a couple of his papers on how he started off with loop learning, single loop learning, double loop learning, and the process where he said it's actually an infinite number of loops so you can always develop. And if you just look at child rearing, you're always learning and you're applying it back to child rearing, right? Because there is no manual for that, just like there really isn't a catch-all manual for any project planning.
Yeah.
As we'll discuss much later, you can have dozens of pieces from ad hoc to agile to scrum, all put together in one project to make it successful. It doesn't have to be just one.
Yeah. Nästa in Swedish, meaning next.
I think we've already kind of touched on this, the relationship between systems thinking and loop learning. I mean, you obviously have to know your process. And a good example of that is the prism on the ceiling tile. You know that the prism is a spectrum of light, Roy G. Biv, for all those who remember. But you know where it came from. So if you take this example, you know that that is light. To get light broken down in a spectrum like that, you had to have a prism. The prism had to be at a correct angle. To have it in the shadow, you had to have the lights off to the room. So the light must be coming in through a window or a flashlight through the prism, reflecting on the ceiling. That's a basic example of a system and your understanding of a system. Now, that is very simple.
Yeah.
When you go to analyze a project for systems thinking and loop learning, it's going to be much more tenuous.
Yeah, but it does allow you some kind of measure of prediction if you've gotten these things kind of close to right, and if your predictions are not right, then you've gotten something wrong in your systems thinking or your loop learning.
Yes. Yes, and if you have the group work set, customer, supplier, customer, that we've talked about several times already, that will help you keep that system thinking closer to a target.
Yeah.
And each organization will be different. You may be able to have 10 people or 10 groups, customer, supplier, customer, or you may only be able to have the 3. That's all based upon your effectiveness of communication, which we will definitely delve into, and we have numerous posts on our website about that.
Yeah.
Because communication is the killer to most everything.
Yeah. And I think a lot of those links are actually on the site, on the training module, or they're either links or they're posted in as items for reading. We're all back to motivation again.
Yeah, I think you told us about this one last time, didn't you, John?
Yes. This is probably the last time we see this slide in this training material, but we are talking about motivation, and that means what moves you, what compels you, right?
Yep, indeed. So last time we talked about Hertzberg and Maslow and the pyramid, the hierarchy of needs, if you were, because Maslow did not coin the pyramid. Everybody structured it like that to make it easier for understanding. But in your initiation phase, you can look at opportunities to motivate your people. Okay, there are several different types of motivation, your incentive motivations, your achievement motivations for your different theories. Okay, take like the example of taking on a project that the company hasn't normally done.
Yeah.
And then giving everyone that's in that project the ability to have a sense of achievement or a challenge. It's common thinking in the motivational arena that people work to the level of challenge they are provided. Okay, by that meaning you have a highly intelligent workforce. I mean, you go through your human resource department to get the right fit for the job, and then you have them sit at a desk and punch in numbers all day.
Yeah. Yeah, you have somebody with a great deal of skill, and then you corral him into something that uses about 60% of his talent or her talent.
Yeah, that's very demotivational.
Oh yeah, that can't be very fun.
So by throwing a challenge out there and planning for it in your initiation and communicating that to your people, you can make them you can have them more motivated because you're giving them an opportunity to learn, opportunity to develop themselves. And if it involves other organizations or even more internal organizations, they get more affiliation with the group. And this yields all sorts of things. An opportunity to learn. A good example of personal mastery. They're learning something. They're becoming better. Right? Yep. Their environment is yielding something that they want. Okay? Individual and team growth. If the team feels the challenge, they usually band together tighter. And that band together tighter allows them to become more cohesive in what they do. And it's common, you'll see it in different projects, even with the same people, because they require different talent sets during different phases. You can see a shift of who winds up running lead and who winds up being support roles inside projects.
Yeah, based on their talent, right? Based on the availability.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and then that self-explanatory for the affiliation. Okay, so you should plan for motivation, learning, and development, or look for the opportunities there in your initiation phase. And this is what we're trying to draw out here, is there's more to looking at the initiation phase than just the Benjamins.
Yeah, for example, in this phase, here's a good opportunity to have maybe another member of your team that would not normally be part of the vetting the scope or understanding the scope be involved.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that can be very motivational.
Yep.
Okay. We touched on the hot stove.
Yeah, we have.
All right, but one of the things in here, we talked about system syncing, double loop learning, and if you want to really draw it out, you call it triple and infinite loop learning, depending on how the process works out for your organization or your group. Okay. The spreads the learning around. Okay. And depends on your organizational structure. Is your organization an open, flat structure, or is it compartmentalized?
Yeah, hierarchical also is another one that can have a big impact.
Yes. So, and it all depends on what you're trying to yield, whether you need one or the other. But in my personal opinion, a more open organization where if I learn something by doing a process, even though you don't actually have your hands fully in that process, I should tell you.
Yeah.
We learned this. And if you look at the model for customer, supplier, customer, and that feedback of what I learned as your supplier or your customer goes back to you, then it will facilitate becoming better. And so spread the learning around, loop learning external to a member or a specific group. What good is it if only one part of your whole organization implies loop learning?
Yeah, not much. You'll get one
Not
star
much.
player, but that'll be about it.
Yes, but it doesn't make the organization better or more effective. And in the end run, a better, more enhanced organization with people who are learning and thinking will yield a better profit.
Yeah, my guess is the person that's learning more is probably going to be more frustrated too.
Exactly. Okay. And the last bullet there, it brings in different perspectives.
Oh, yep. Well, that's part of the whole uncovering the system as well. Those different perspectives gives you the opportunity of actually theorizing the system with some measure of fidelity to the actual system.
Yes, it's very common in the change management books you'll read, where I think I'm at and where I really am at are two solely different items.
Yeah.
But if I take my plan and base it on where I think I'm at to go where I'm going, where I want to be, I could wind up thousands of miles off, and that plays into the archetypes, shifting of burden, unintended consequences, and all that.
Yeah.
So we took a little liberties here with Lewin and the loop learning model to draw up a simple diagram. You want to explain this a little bit, John?
Nah, you're the one that drew this up, brother. I remember you drawing this up. We've had it out here for a while.
Yep, this is actually part of one of our blog posts and actually links to several other blog posts. Like if you look at it here with the leadership equation, right? We actually have several blog posts on the leadership equation where we break it down into different aspects. So there is not actually a given starting point in loop learning. The closest that I would have to say, if you were going to say it, would be your perception. Because everybody starts off with a mental model. Whoa, mental model, yet another one of the fifth disciplines.
There's
Serenity strikes again.
Our magic word, ding, 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 ding.
So we all start with a perception. Our perception is based on our experiences. Our experiences model our behavior, and our behavior feeds into how we perceive things because people respond to our behavior. It's just human nature. Someone comes into the room, they're all bubbly and giggly. Next thing you know, you got a room full of happy-go-lucky people. Someone comes in, it's Oscar the Grouch. You've got a room full of people that don't want anything to do.
Yeah.
Okay? So between personal behavior and perception, the killer of all good things are the yielder of great things, communication. We already talked about how step increase of barriers between effective communication, and that comes into play with your perception. If you cannot communicate effectively because the group size is too large, or you're not a good communicator with emails or on drawings or whatever platform you're using for communication, you get a different response back from the people you're expecting. That response in turn taints your perception, which feeds your experience model, and then taints or could angle your behavior differently. And that cycle becomes a vicious downward cycle.
Or upward, but mostly down. Or mostly downward, though. Yeah, you're closer to accurate with the mostly downward. This is how we ruin our employees.
Yes, this is commonly how things get tainted.
Sadly.
Okay, and if we look at our initiation phase and our communication effectively of our strategy and what we're trying to achieve and broke it down into steps, here's the top tier of where we want to be, here's the next level of where we want to be, and it keeps breaking down and down. Your communication gets more veneer as your group gets larger, and as your group gets better communication, they perceive the situation as you're trying to effectively yield good results. They get a happy experience. Their behavior yields good deals. Now the perception feeds itself. They think everything's going to go just fine because they understand what's going on, and it continues, and that's an upward spiral. But guess this upward spiral was planned in the initiation phase by using more than just an accountant and an upper level manager to look at whether the project could yield results or not.
Yeah, to go through those things that you needed to deliver in the initiating phase. Yeah.
Okay, and the other thing we'd like to bring out here is the open mental model. Now, this is another one of the fifth disciplines. However, Stagegate coined it as a mental model. He didn't say open. And several of our blog posts, we referred to it as the open mental model, and I'll explain to you why real quick. There are a lot of people who have mental models. It's basically your perception of the world. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're willing to let anyone change it, which is not really a good thing. Dialogue with another individual or group of individuals is what really promotes learning. Okay? You could read 1,000 books and still not understand the subtle nuances of how things are, and have one discussion with one person, and that exchange and free flow of ideas with an open mental model could yield more than anything else. So just having a mental model is like saying you have a car. It doesn't make it fast. It doesn't make it pretty. It's just a car. Having an open mental model allows it to grow and develop, which is very important. And there's more on this one, too, in the blog post. I'm sure that we'll be touching on this quite a bit later.
Yeah, this article.
The article on leadership.
Yep.
Go ahead, John.
No, you go ahead.
See the article on the leadership equation posted in Module 2. All right, so in the actual course, there's several of the articles about the leadership equation and how it's broken down. Okay, so what we did is we started off with the basic leadership equation and said, what makes this portion of the equation? Okay, experience. And if you look at the equation, you'll see that experience became a prevalent factor in that equation. Okay, but let's be serious. There isn't an equation for figuring people out.
Yeah, If it only was that easy.
Exactly. X does not equal good or bad when you're trying to figure out people or groups of people.
Yeah, but we know what it equals.
We know what it equals. All right, but we recommend you look at those two or three articles we have on that.
Yep.
All right, organizational benefits. So getting the most out of your talent. Now we touched on this, and I believe, John, this was one of your favorites on the project analysis, wasn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is.
Knowing your talent.
Yeah, knowing your talent and growing it, and tapping into what they know when you need it, as frequently as you can, and to use that to develop it and build it even more so.
Yes, which feeds right into the next one, longevity of your personnel and of the organization.
Yeah.
If you look at a lot of times, several organizations will go outside of the organization to hire senior personnel. And exactly why an organization would do that, unless they're just missing that talent, which means they haven't developed their organization,
I
or
knew
they don't have a structure.
I knew an organization that had available talent in a particular segment. Let's just say it was, because we're talking about project management. Let's talk about project management, but it wasn't that. And they had some talent that was demonstrated in project management, and they chose to bring in an outside mechanical person with some to do the project management work. I don't really know, and I'm theorizing the person that had the project skill was probably felt a little slighted by all that.
Right. So that is a good motivation, segue into motivation. A little care goes a long way.
Yep.
Okay, so showing your people that you're interested in or yielding them to the next level. Sharing or cross-training them so that when the time comes they can move to the next level, they're not just stuck where they are, is very important for not only the organization's life cycle, but for the individual as well. Okay, and both of those touch very deeply into constantly improving. You should always be looking at making your people better, making your organization better.
That's a good one right there.
Yep. That's very important.
Yeah, for me, those kind of things enable you to keep those people, and you only want to keep them around if they're learning constantly. Anyway, if they've been in your company 10 years and they know exactly what they knew 10 years ago, you probably don't need them quite so much anymore.
Well, that's a good segue into, is your organization an actual learning organization if your people only know what they knew 10 years ago?
Yeah, the answer would be
why
no.
aren't your people developing? And it could be one fold, it could be them, they just don't care, they're just there to get a check. Or it could be the organization, they just want to do what they've been doing for the last 20 years, which means they'll soon be extinct because there's always someone striving for better, stronger, faster. Okay?
Yep.
Sooner or later it'll catch up with them.
Yep.
Or it could be a combination of both.
Even an engineer is outdated after 10 years. If they haven't been working.
Well, even if they're working, if they're producing the same thing over and over again,
they're not learning something new, then they're pretty much toast.
Exactly.
Yep.
So the organization should be continually mentoring and growing its people.
Yeah.
And it should instill in their people the desire to do that. And we'll go back to the three things, right? The Stagegate, personal mastery, group and organizational mastery, and corporate mastery.
Yep.
Recommend everybody go to that blog post and take a look at it.
Yep. I'll post it in this learning module.
Okay.
And at this point, this is where This module goes with the assignments for day 3 through 5, and the assignment is to discuss the two theories, OL, OD, and motivation. In the discussion, there's a positive link for two theories discussed, and you explain your thinking on that as well. And that concludes this module. Hope you think of value transformation when you think of product development training, learning organization management training kind of thing, project management. We are available online like this. We could come to your facility, or we could schedule something for an offsite. And there's our contact information. And we wish you a happy day and good luck in your learning organization and development endeavors. And I think that's time we say goodbye, Shawn Quigley.
All right, we stop recording.
And we stop recording. And we stop recording.